Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a deeply personal and emotional journey of love, betrayal, and the resilience to reclaim one's life. This is the story of a woman who, after decades of marriage, discovers the shocking truth about her husband's secret life and the financial betrayal that shakes her to the core. What follows is a tale of courage, heartbreak, and ultimately, empowerment. Stay with us as we unfold this life-altering story. And remember, sometimes the hardest chapters bring the greatest lessons. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start the story today. I still remember that day, as if it was yesterday. Although it's been years now. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and I had just come back from a trip to the farmer's market. The smell of fresh bread, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot as I walked. It all felt so normal. It was the sort of day that should have felt simple and peaceful. But what I found when I stepped inside the house shattered everything. I had just gotten back from my usual weekend routine. I was in the kitchen putting away the vegetables when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it, probably a message from one of the kids or a reminder from my book club. Something trivial, but when I saw it was an email from the bank, my heart skipped a beat. I was no stranger to checking our financial statements, after all. Mark and I had always been very careful with money. Our retirement savings were our safety net. The one thing we'd promised ourselves we would never touch. No matter what. But there it was, a large withdrawal. Nearly $490. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked through the transaction details. My hands shaking. There was no explanation, just a wire transfer to an account in Wyoming. To a name I didn't recognize. For a moment, I convinced myself there had to be a mistake. A typo, something technical, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. That amount of money wasn't a random mistake. The reality hit me like a cold wind. My husband, Mark, the man I had spent 27 years of my life with, had done something unforgivable. I wasn't even sure how to approach him. Our marriage had always been steady, nothing extraordinary. But we were comfortable, content. We had raised 3 children together. Our eldest, Emma, was in medical school, full of ambition and dreams. Jake, our middle child, was finishing his master's degree in engineering. And our youngest, Sophie, was still in college, figuring out who she wanted to be. We had built our lives on trust. But now, here was this betrayal, hanging like a dark cloud. I confronted him that night. The words came out in a rush, choked with confusion and disbelief. Mark, what's this? What's going on with the money? He looked at me for a moment, his face drawn, but then he simply shrugged. What money? His tone was defensive, dismissive, as if I was overreacting. I was shocked. The $490. Mark, the transfer to that account. Who is it for? His expression hardened, and he stood up. This is ridiculous. Lisa, you're always on my back about something. What do you want from me? We'll talk about it later. But later never came. He stormed out of the house that evening, leaving me standing there, frozen with confusion and a sinking feeling in my chest. He didn't come back that night, nor did he come back the next. For days, I waited. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to call him or give him space. But then, as if to torture me, I started seeing more and more signs of what was happening. I stumbled upon a social media post that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Mark, smiling in the sun, his arm wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize. Her name was Brooke Carter, and the caption under the photo said, "Another perfect day in paradise. Thanks for the trip, darling." It was clear they were on vacation together, on an island somewhere warm. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, not sure what I was seeing. The betrayal felt too real, too raw. This was not just some casual fling, some harmless mistake. This was a long-term affair, one that had been going on for a while, and I could feel it in my gut. I needed to know more. I spent hours researching, calling the bank, looking into the transactions. I had always trusted Mark to manage our finances. But now that trust was shattered. And the deeper I dug, the worse it became. There were more transfers, more money moved around like it was nothing to him. Money I had worked for. Money we had both agreed would be our safety in old age. And there was Brooke. Her name kept popping up, taunting me in the background, with every smiling photo and every post where she flaunted their vacations. It felt like my world was crumbling. How could Mark, the man I had loved, the father of our children, do this to me? I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly alone. But that's when the anger started to set in. Not just anger at Mark, but at myself, too. Why hadn't I seen this coming? How could I have missed all the signs? He had always been secretive with his phone, but I'd brushed it off. I had trusted him, and now I was paying the price. There was a moment, in the dead of night, when I stood by the window and just let myself cry. It wasn't a quiet sobbing, it was a full, heart-wrenching cry. I think I had been holding everything in for too long, pretending everything was fine, telling myself that love was enough. But it wasn't. Love wasn't enough to keep him faithful. It wasn't enough to keep him from emptying our future for the sake of his own desires. But even through the tears, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let this man, this betrayal, take everything from me. I had worked too hard, fought too long for our family, to let it all slip away because of his selfishness. I made a promise to myself that night. I would fight back. I wouldn't just sit here and let him tear apart everything we had built. The road ahead would be long, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. But I was done being the passive woman in this story. It was time for me to take control. Time to find the strength I didn't even know I had. And it all started with one decision. I would find out everything. Everything. About Mark, about Brooke, and about how to get back what was rightfully mine. It wasn't long before I realized that I couldn't simply confront Mark. Not yet anyway. I had to know everything. The whole truth. Before I could make any decisions. I knew I had to gather my thoughts. But more importantly, I had to gather the facts. It felt almost like I was becoming a different person, someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was willing to dig through every piece of his life, his secrets, and unearth them. I wasn't doing this just to catch him out, but to understand what had gone wrong, what he had done to us. It started with Brooke. I needed to know who she was. Why her? What did she have that I didn't? I spent hours online, trying to trace her, Brooke Carter. A woman whose face had now become a symbol of everything that was wrong in my life. Her social media was a goldmine. Photos of their vacations Mark and I had never taken. Moments of laughter and intimacy that should have been ours. Brooke's profile revealed just enough. She worked at a law firm in Denver, not far from where we lived. And according to her posts, she was a woman of means. She was well-traveled, confident, and, at least on the surface, charming. It struck me as odd, though, that she and Mark had kept their relationship so public. Mark, who had always been cautious about his privacy, had let her take center stage in his life. Why would he do that? Was he so comfortable with her that he didn't care who knew? I found myself staring at a particular photo of them at a resort in the Caribbean. Their arms around each other, their smiles wide and carefree. I couldn't help but feel a wave of bitterness. I had always thought we were happy, our own lives a little ordinary perhaps, but secure. But here he was, in the sun, with her, and there I was, left in the cold. I couldn't stop myself. I drove to Denver one weekend, not really knowing what I was hoping to find, but knowing I had to see it for myself. There was a chance I might be overreacting, but I had to see it all in person. I pulled into the parking lot of the law firm where Brooke worked. I didn't go inside, couldn't bring myself to do that, but I stayed there, watching the building, feeling the weight of all the questions pressing down on me. I didn't find any answers that day. At least not the kind I was hoping for. But I did find something else. Something that changed the course of my next steps. A familiar car drove past me, and I recognized it instantly. Mark's car. My heart stopped. Was he meeting her? Was he on his way to her office? I followed him, instinctively, I suppose. Or maybe out of sheer frustration, but the journey only led to more questions. Mark turned into a small, quaint cafe on the outskirts of Denver. The kind of place we used to frequent when we first met. Our spot. He sat down at a table outside. And minutes later, Brooke appeared. I couldn't breathe. There they were, sitting across from each other, laughing, chatting as if they were old friends. The way they looked at each other, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't just some fling. This was something more, and as I sat there, my heart heavy in my chest, I realized that what I had suspected was true. My husband had not just betrayed me financially, he had betrayed me emotionally, too. I sat there for what felt like hours, watching them. I don't know why I didn't go up to him. Why I didn't confront them both right then and there. Maybe it was because I wasn't ready to see him look at me the way he had looked at her. Maybe it was because I knew, deep down, that I couldn't let my own anger consume me just yet. I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. But I felt the sting of it. Sharp and raw. Each smile, each shared moment between them was like a punch to my gut. I wanted to scream, to run up to him and ask him why her? Why now? Why me? But I couldn't. Not yet. As I drove home that night, tears blurring my vision, something inside me shifted. The weight of what I had seen, the cold truth that I was no longer the only woman in his life, had settled deep into my bones. I wasn't just hurt, I was enraged, but I was also, somehow, empowered. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to find out everything. And then, I would decide what I would do next. Because no matter how hard it was to admit, no matter how much it hurt, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't about to let Mark, or anyone, take my life from me. The days that followed felt like a blur. The image of Mark and Brooke, sitting together in that cafe, had haunted me every waking moment. Every conversation I had with him felt like a performance. He had no idea that I knew, at least. I thought he didn't, but I knew now. I knew everything. I spent my time piecing the puzzle together. I had all the information I needed. I couldn't go back to the woman I was before this happened. Innocence lost, that's what it felt like. The veil had been lifted. And I was suddenly staring at a world that wasn't quite as secure as I thought. But what I couldn't yet answer was why. Why had Mark done this? Was it a midlife crisis? A moment of weakness? Or was I simply never enough? I didn't have all the answers. But I had one crucial thing. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it. It was like a storm on the horizon, waiting to break. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't sit back and wait for him to confess. No. I needed to force his hand. I couldn't live in this gray area of uncertainty any longer. I called him one afternoon while he was at work, telling him I needed to talk. When he asked about what, I simply said, "It's important." Mark agreed to meet at the Riverbend Cafe, a quiet spot we used to go to when we were dating. Before life and all its responsibilities got in the way, I felt a strange sense of calm as I waited for him. The old version of me would have been nervous, sweaty palms, heart racing, but not now. Now, I was simply waiting for the moment of truth. When Mark arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept. There were dark circles under his eyes. His usual smile absent. He knew this conversation was coming. I could feel it. He sat down, his body tense, but tried to play it off with a small, nervous chuckle. "You okay?" he asked. His voice shaky. "You seem a bit off." "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I need to talk to you about something. Something that's been bothering me." He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning my face, probably trying to read me. But there was no hiding what I was about to say. I took a deep breath. "I know about Brooke." His face went pale. For a split second, I saw the panic in his eyes. The guilt. But it was only for a moment. He quickly masked it, trying to regain control. "What do you mean?" I mean, I know about you too. The trips, the messages, everything." My voice cracked a little. And I hated myself for showing any weakness. But I pushed through. "I don't know what's worse, the fact that you've been lying to me for months. Or the fact that you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth." There was a long pause as Mark sat back in his chair, staring at me with a mix of disbelief and sorrow. He didn't speak at first. Maybe he didn't know where to start. I didn't know either. But eventually, the words came. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said, his voice low and filled with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did." My voice was quieter now, but there was no mistaking the cold edge in it. "You've hurt me in a way that I never thought you could." "Not like this." Mark looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching nervously. I could see that he was struggling. "I don't even know how it happened," he said, almost to himself. "Brooke, it wasn't planned. I felt like I was lost. And she was, there. She made me feel alive again. I didn't know what to do. So I kept it hidden. I thought maybe I could fix things. That it wouldn't get this far." His words hung in the air between us. But they felt empty. All the explanations in the world couldn't change the fact that he had chosen someone else. That he had betrayed me, not just physically, but emotionally. "Did you ever think about how I'd feel?" I asked, suddenly feeling tired. "How you'd hurt me. You've been so selfish, Mark." His eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. But I don't know if I can fix this." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. Did I still love him? Was love enough to overcome this? The answer wasn't easy. I wasn't sure what the future held. But I knew something for certain. This wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about me, and whether I could reclaim the version of myself that I had lost. It was about finding peace, no matter what the outcome. "I don't know what we'll do," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I do know that I can't stay in this, not like this." The silence between us was heavy. He had no words left. And I didn't either. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. As I left the cafe, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, but also a sense of strength I hadn't realized I'd been holding onto. It was as though, in confronting the truth, I had started the long, painful process of healing. I didn't know what would happen with Mark. Maybe we'd try to rebuild what was broken. Or maybe this was the end of the road for us. But whatever the outcome, I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in the shadows of uncertainty any longer. Life had a strange way of pushing us to face our darkest fears. To force us into moments that felt impossible to survive. But we do. We survive. We learn to rebuild ourselves from the wreckage, piece by piece. And this moment, this heartache, this confrontation, was just another part of that process. I had no answers yet. But I felt, for the first time in a long while, that I was taking control of my own story. The next chapter was mine to write. And it would be one that I could face with pride. No matter what. Thank you for watching this life story. If you want to hear more personal journeys, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos. Life is unpredictable, but we're all learning and growing together. Stay strong, and take care of yourselves.